Growing up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, life was simple, maybe even boring. Our houses all looked the same, lined up in neat rows with freshly mowed lawns and white fences. My parents always worked late. Dad was a manager at a factory, and mom was a nurse pulling long night shifts. That meant most evenings, the house felt empty, echoing with silence. But across the street lived Emily, my neighbor since I could remember. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was my safe place. If I scraped my knee riding my bike, she was the one who'd run into her garage to grab a Band-Aid. If I forgot my house key, I'd end up on her porch until my parents got home. Emily was a year older than me, and everyone in the neighborhood saw her as this perfect girl. Straight A student, captain of the soccer team, church volunteer, you name it. To me, though, she was just Emily, the girl who made me laugh when I felt invisible, the one who'd sneak over with popcorn and soda when she knew I was stuck home alone. When my parents argued, because they always did, usually about money, her house was my escape. The warm smell of her mom's cooking, the sound of laughter at their dinner table, the way her dad always asked me how school was going. It was the kind of family life I thought only existed in TV shows. And I envied it. Badly. One summer night, after another fight between my parents where dad stormed out and mom locked herself in her room, I slipped out and walked across the street. Emily was already sitting on her porch, like she was waiting for me. "Rough night again?" she asked softly. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. She scooted over and handed me a popsicle from the box she'd brought out. We sat there in silence, the sticky sweetness melting in the humid air. "You know," she said after a while, "my family isn't as perfect as they look." I laughed because I thought she was joking. "Yeah, right. Your family's, like, perfect. Her smile faltered for just a second, and her eyes drifted toward the window of her house. But then she forced a laugh and shook her head. "Trust me, nobody's perfect." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Emily always brushed off compliments like that. But looking back now, that moment was the first tiny crack in the image I had of her flawless life. As the years went on, our bond only grew stronger. We studied together, joined the same after-school clubs, and shared secrets we'd never tell anyone else. She was the first person I called when I got my first crush. She was the only one who knew how badly my parents' constant fighting hurt me. And when my mom forgot to show up for my middle school awards ceremony, Emily sat in the front row and cheered loud enough for both of them. That night, as we walked home, she linked her arm through mine and said, "You've got me, always." It wasn't just words. She meant it. At least, that's what I believe. By the time high school rolled around, everyone admired Emily. Teachers adored her, classmates respected her, and parents in the neighborhood used her as the golden example for their kids. But me? I got to see the side of her nobody else did. The silly side, the insecure side, the girl who stayed up until 2 a.m. stressing about a math test even though she'd ace it anyway. She was the closest thing I had to family that felt safe. But then, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Little things, like how she'd avoid answering questions about her home life, or how she'd suddenly flinch whenever her dad's car pulled into the driveway, or how her laughter sounded a little forced, like she was trying too hard to convince everyone, including me, that everything was fine. One Friday night during sophomore year, she asked if she could stay over at my house. I thought nothing of it at first. We'd had sleepovers since forever. But this time, she didn't bring her usual bubbly energy. She just sat on my bed, hugging her knees, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Emily, what's wrong?" I asked. She looked up at me, her face pale. For a second, it seemed like she was about to tell me something important. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening, and just shook her head. "Nothing. Forget it." She forced a smile and changed the subject, but my gut told me something was off. And that was the beginning of the secret. The one I didn't uncover until much later. The one that changed everything. At the time, though, I clung to what I knew. Emily was my neighbor, my best friend, my anchor in a world that often felt like it was falling apart. I didn't know that her world was already crumbling, and that one night, the truth would come crashing into mine too. Because no matter how much you think you know someone, sometimes the people closest to you are hiding the darkest truths. And Emily? She was hiding something bigger than I ever could have imagined. By junior year of high school, Emily and I had a rhythm. We walked to school together every morning, sat at the same lunch table, and studied at the library most evenings. To everyone else, we looked inseparable, like the picture-perfect best friends in some coming-of-age movie. But behind the curtain, I started to notice the cracks. Emily's once bubbly energy faded into something more brittle. Her jokes felt rehearsed, her smile forced. She'd zone out in the middle of conversations, and sometimes when I caught her staring off into space, her eyes looked glassy, like she was somewhere else entirely. "Are you okay?" I'd ask her. "Yeah, just tired," she'd say, brushing it off. Always the same excuse. One afternoon, we were sitting on her porch after school, and her dad's car pulled into the driveway. Emily froze. Literally froze, like someone had pressed pause on her body. Her hands gripped the armrest of her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. I frowned. "You good?" She forced a laugh. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" Her dad got out of the car, smiling that same warm, charming smile he always had. He called out, "Hey girls, how was school?" Emily immediately plastered on her perfect daughter grin and shouted back, "Great, Dad." But the second he walked inside, her shoulders slumped like the air had been punched out of her. That was the first time I thought, something's not right. The signs only got louder from there. Emily started finding excuses not to invite me into her house. If we hung out, it was always at my place or somewhere neutral. When I'd casually ask, "Why don't we study at yours tonight?" she'd hesitate, then make up some reason about her mom cleaning or her little brother being annoying. One evening, though, she didn't have a choice. My mom had finally remembered to cook dinner, and she insisted Emily stay over. After dinner, I offered to walk Emily home. We crossed the street together, and when we reached her porch, she froze again. The lights inside were dim, but the muffled sound of raised voices leaked through the walls. Her face drained of color. I whispered. She shook her head sharply. "Go home, okay? I'll text you later." "Wait, are you?" "I said go," she snapped, her voice trembling. I stepped back, stunned. I'd never seen her like that before, so harsh, so desperate. That night, she didn't text me. The next day at school, she acted like nothing happened. Like she hadn't just stood frozen on her porch while her house erupted with shouting. Like she hadn't pushed me away so hard it stung. But I couldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way Emily always wore long sleeves, even on hot days. The way she flinched if someone touched her shoulder unexpectedly. The way she avoided eye contact whenever anyone mentioned her dad. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. That I was overanalyzing because my own home life was falling apart. My parents' fights had escalated to the point where Dad started sleeping on the couch, and Mom barely spoke to either of us. Maybe I was projecting my chaos onto Emily's perfect family. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just me. Something was happening behind her walls. Something she didn't want anyone to see. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, around 11 p.m., when I heard a knock on my window. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then it came again, urgent and sharp. I pulled back the curtain, and there was Emily. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red and swollen. She was still wearing her soccer uniform, dirt smeared on her legs like she'd run straight from practice. I rushed to open the window. "Emily?" "What?" "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Can I come in?" I didn't even hesitate. She climbed through my window and collapsed onto the floor, shaking. "Emily, what happened?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She buried her face in her hands. I can't go back there tonight." "Why not?" Her whole body trembled. For a second, I thought she was going to tell me everything. But then she looked up, panic flashing across her eyes. "Promise you won't tell anyone I was here. Promise." "I promise," I said without thinking. She took a shaky breath. Just let me stay here. Just tonight." I nodded. I gave her a blanket, let her curl up on my bed, and pretended to fall asleep beside her. But I couldn't sleep. Not when my best friend was lying next to me, broken in a way I didn't understand. Around 2 a.m., I heard her whispering. Not to me, maybe to herself. Her voice was so soft I barely caught it. I wish he'd just stop. Please, just stop. My heart sank. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She thanked me for letting her stay, brushed her hair, fixed her makeup, and left with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I couldn't forget her words. Something was happening in that house. Something she was too afraid to say out loud. And I knew then, no matter how much she pushed me away, no matter how many lies she told to keep her secret, I had to find out the truth. Because Emily wasn't just my neighbor. She was my family. And if she was hurting, I needed to know why. But what I didn't realize was that digging for the truth would open a door neither of us could ever close again. And once I stepped through it, everything I thought I knew about Emily and about what it meant to trust someone would be shattered. The weeks that followed were like walking on a tightrope with Emily. Some days she was her old self, laughing, teasing, talking about college applications and future plans like everything was normal. But other days, she was distant, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her eyes shadowed with worry. I tried not to push her. She hated being cornered. But the memory of that night, she whispered, I wish he'd just stop haunting me. I couldn't let it go. One Friday night in October, my parents were out, Dad working overtime, Mom pulling another night shift. I was alone when I saw Emily's bedroom light flicker on across the street. Then I heard it. Even with my window closed, I could make out the sound of shouting. A man's voice, deep, angry, booming. A woman's voice, sharp and panicked. Then silence. My chest tightened. I threw on a hoodie, slipped out the back door, and crossed the street. When I got to Emily's house, I could hear it clearer. Her dad yelling about something, his words slurred, like he'd been drinking. Emily's mom's voice, soft and pleading. And then a sound that made my blood run cold. Something crashing, like glass shattering. I froze on the porch. My fists clenched. Should I knock? Call the police? Run back home? My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Then, through the thin gap in the curtains, I saw Emily. She was standing in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling. Her dad towered over her, his hand raised, then dropping as if he caught himself. Emily's little brother sat on the stairs, clutching the railing, his eyes wide with fear. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My perfect neighbor's perfect family was collapsing in front of me, and I was just a witness. Finally, Emily's dad stormed out of the room, slamming the door to his study so hard the walls shook. Emily's mom tried to comfort her, but Emily pulled away, racing upstairs and slamming her bedroom door. That was when I made my choice. I ran back across the street, grabbed my phone, and texted her. Are you okay? Do you want me to come over? No response. I stared at the glowing screen, my heart sinking. Then, finally, 3 dots appeared. Can I come to yours? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Windows open. Minutes later, she was climbing through, her face blotchy from crying, her sleeves pulled down over her hands. She sat on the edge of my bed, silent. I wanted to ask her everything. But when I opened my mouth, she whispered, Don't. Please, don't ask. I closed it again. Instead, I sat beside her. After a long silence, she whispered, You can't tell anyone. Not my teachers, not your parents, not even my mom. Promise me. I swallowed hard. Emily, I promise, she said, her voice breaking. I looked at her, at the pain in her eyes, at the way she was holding herself together by a thread. And I nodded. I promise. She let out a shaky breath and leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. That night, I didn't sleep again. My mind raced with questions, anger, fear. How long had this been happening? How much had she been hiding? How could everyone else in the neighborhood still believe her family was perfect when the truth was so ugly? The next morning, she slipped out before dawn, whispering, Thank you, before disappearing back into her house. But nothing was the same after that. At school, Emily's mask slipped more often. She came to class with bruises she brushed off as soccer injuries. She stopped joining after-school activities. She avoided her dad's phone calls. And I started watching her differently, not just as my best friend, but as someone carrying a secret so heavy it could crush her. I couldn't hold it in anymore. One afternoon, I cornered her by the lockers. "Emily," I said quietly. "I saw what happened. I heard him." Her eyes widened in panic. "You weren't supposed to." "I couldn't just ignore it," I said, my voice shaking. "Emily, this isn't okay." "He can't." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "You don't understand. If you tell anyone, it'll only get worse." "Worse than this?" I asked, my throat tight. He's hurting you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head violently. "No, he gets angry. But he doesn't mean it. He loves us. You don't get it. You have your own family drama. But at least your dad just leaves when he's mad. Mine doesn't leave." Her words hit me like a punch. "Emily," I whispered, but she was already grabbing her books, walking away before I could say more. I stood there, frozen, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath me. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything else. My best friend was trapped in a nightmare, and she was begging me to stay silent. But how could I? I thought about calling Child Protective Services, about telling a teacher, about running across the street and screaming at her dad. But every scenario ended with Emily hating me. Losing her. And losing her felt like losing the only good thing in my life. So I stayed quiet. Until the night everything exploded. It was a Saturday. I was finishing homework when I heard it again, shouting from across the street. Louder this time. Angrier. I ran to the window. The curtains in Emily's house were wide open. Her dad was in the living room, his face red with rage, screaming at her mom. Emily stood between them, her arms outstretched like a shield. And then he shoved her. She stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I bolted out the door, across the street, and into their house. I didn't care if I got caught. I didn't care if I wasn't wanted there. When I burst into the living room, everyone froze. Emily on the floor, clutching her arm. Her mom crying. Her little brother hiding behind the couch. And her dad, towering over them all, breathing hard, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. "What are you doing in my house?" he growled. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Stop hurting them." His face twisted with fury, and for a second, I thought he was going to come at me. But Emily scrambled up, grabbing my hand. "Go," she whispered, her eyes wild with fear. "Please, just go." But I didn't. I squeezed her hand and said, "Not this time." And that was the moment everything changed. Because once the truth was out in the open, there was no going back. And I had no idea how much darker the truth would get from here. The living room was dead silent except for the sound of Emily's dad breathing heavily, his fists clenching at his sides. My heart was racing so hard I thought I might pass out, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Not when Emily was gripping my hand like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her mom's voice cracked first. "Please, Mark. Stop. Not in front of them." Emily's dad turned on her with eyes so cold, they made my stomach twist. "You don't get to tell me what to do in my own house." I wanted to scream at him to drag Emily out the door, but I was frozen in a nightmare that didn't belong to me but had pulled me in anyway. Finally, Emily whispered, "Let's go," tugging at my hand. I nodded quickly, and together we bolted out the front door. We didn't stop running until we were across the street, slamming my front door shut behind us. Inside, Emily collapsed against the wall, shaking. Tears streamed down her face as she slid to the floor. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. I knelt in front of her. I couldn't just stand there and watch. "Emily, he shoved you." She buried her face in her hands. "You don't understand. Now it's going to be worse. He's going to be furious that you saw." I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Then let's tell someone. The police, a teacher, anyone. You can't keep living like this." Her eyes widened in horror. No. If anyone finds out, they'll take my brother away. They'll tear my family apart. Emily. My voice cracked. Your family's already falling apart. The words hung between us like smoke, choking both of us. She shoved my hands away and stood up, pacing the room. You don't get it. He's still my dad. And I love him, even when he's like this. I just wish he'd change. I felt helpless. Completely helpless. Nothing I said seemed to get through to her. That night, she stayed at my house again. I gave her my bed, and I lay awake on the floor, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the girl who had always been my safe place could be living in so much danger right across the street. The next week at school, things spiraled fast. Rumors started spreading. Someone had heard yelling at Emily's house, and by Monday, whispers followed us down the hall. Did you hear her dad drinks? Maybe that's why she's always at her neighbor's house. I heard he hit her. Emily walked through it all with her head high, pretending she didn't hear. But I saw the way her jaw tightened, the way her hands shook when she thought nobody was looking. At lunch, I whispered, "Do you want me to shut them up?" She shook her head. "If you defend me, it'll just make it worse." Let them talk, but letting them talk was torture. I hated the way people twisted her pain into gossip, like it was entertainment. One afternoon, after soccer practice, Emily finally cracked. We were sitting on the bleachers, the field lights buzzing overhead, when she turned to me and whispered, "I can't keep doing this." I leaned closer. "Then let me help you, please." She stared at the ground, her voice breaking. "What if nobody believes me? What if they think I'm lying? My dad's so good at pretending. Everyone thinks he's perfect. What if they take his side?" I reached for her hand. "Then I'll believe you, no matter what. You're not alone in this." Her eyes filled with tears. But she nodded slowly, like she was letting herself trust me, even just a little. That night, something happened I never expected. My mom came home early. For once, she didn't head straight to bed. She saw Emily sitting at our kitchen table, pale and quiet, and asked gently, "Honey, is everything okay at home?" Emily froze. I held my breath, praying she'd say something, anything. But she forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine, just tired." My mom gave her a long look, then glanced at me, like she knew there was more. But she didn't push. She just patted Emily's shoulder and said, "Well, you're always welcome here." After she went upstairs, I whispered, "Why didn't you tell her?" Emily shook her head. "Because once I say it out loud, I can't take it back. And then everything changes." She looked at me, her eyes wide and scared. I don't want to lose my family. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she deserved better, that love wasn't supposed to feel like fear. But instead, I just whispered, "Then you won't lose me." The breaking point came a week later. It was late again, and I was lying in bed when I heard the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against my walls. I jumped up, heart pounding, and ran to the window. Police cars lined the street in front of Emily's house. I threw on shoes and ran outside. Neighbors were gathering on lawns, whispering. And then I saw her, Emily, standing in her driveway, her face pale, her arms wrapped around her little brother. Her mom was crying. Two officers were speaking to her dad, who looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. I pushed through the crowd. "Emily." She turned, and the second she saw me, she broke. She ran straight into my arms, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "They called the cops," she gasped. "The neighbors heard, he was yelling again, and they called." I held her tight, my own eyes stinging. "It's going to be okay. It has to be." But deep down, I knew nothing would ever be okay again. The perfect picture of Emily's family was shattered for good. Everyone knew now. Everyone had seen. And the fallout was only just beginning. The next day, the whole town was buzzing. Parents whispered in grocery store aisles. Teachers exchanged looks in the hallways. Kids at school treated Emily like she was made of glass, some with pity, some with judgment. She must be lying. No, I heard the cops came. It has to be true. Can you imagine? All this time and nobody knew. Emily kept her head down, but I could see the storm brewing inside her. One night, As we sat on my porch, she whispered, "I hate that they all know now. I hate that they're looking at me like I'm broken." "You're not broken," I said fiercely. "You're the strongest person I know." She looked at me, her voice trembling. "Then why does it feel like I'm falling apart?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was take her hand and squeeze it, praying she could feel the truth in my silence. Because Emily's battle wasn't just against her dad anymore. It was against the weight of everyone knowing, the weight of shame and gossip and fear. And I didn't know if even I was strong enough to hold her up through it all. After the police showed up that night, nothing in the neighborhood felt the same. For years, everyone had admired Emily's family, the perfect house, the perfect lawn, the perfect daughter who seemed to shine brighter than all of us. But once the truth came out, whispers spread like wildfire. Some neighbors pretended not to know. Others stared too long, their curiosity masked as pity. And some kept their distance entirely, as if pain was contagious. Emily hated all of it. At school, she walked with her head down, ignoring the way people's voices dropped when she passed. The same classmates who once envied her now avoided her, unsure of what to say. She told me once, "It's like they don't see me anymore. They just see the story." I wanted to scream at everyone. She's still Emily. She's still the girl who makes the best popcorn for movie nights. The girl who plays guitar at bonfires. The girl who stayed up with me when my parents forgot my birthday. But the world had already made up its mind. And then came the hardest part. Her dad didn't leave. For a while, things seemed calmer. He stopped drinking, or at least tried to. The shouting quieted down. Social workers visited the house, asking questions, making notes. To outsiders, it looked like progress. But I could see the truth in Emily's eyes. The fear was still there, tucked beneath her smile. Every time the front door slammed, her shoulders tensed. Every time her dad raised his voice, even if it wasn't at her, she froze. "You can't heal in the same place you were hurt," I told her one night. She sighed. "But where would we go? My mom won't leave him. She says we have to keep the family together. And my little brother. He still loves him. He doesn't understand." Her words broke my heart. Because I knew she wasn't just fighting her dad. She was fighting to protect the pieces of her family that still felt worth saving. Things came to a breaking point in the spring. Emily and I were studying in the library when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and went pale. Without a word, she stuffed her books into her bag. "Emily? What's wrong?" I asked. "I have to go," she said, her voice tight. I followed her outside. "Tell me what's going on." She stopped, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's my brother. He texted me. He's scared. I have to get home. I'm coming with you." She hesitated, then nodded, and we ran. When we burst into her house, the scene made my stomach drop. Her dad was drunk again, pacing the living room, shouting nonsense at her mom. Her brother sat on the stairs, crying. Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped between them, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Stop it. You're scaring him." For a moment, I thought her dad might actually hit her. His face twisted with rage, his hand twitching at his side. But then he saw me, standing in the doorway, phone in hand, ready to call the police. Something flickered in his eyes. Shame? Fear? I couldn't tell. But instead of lashing out, he stumbled back, muttering under his breath before storming out of the house. The door slammed. Silence followed. Emily's mom sank onto the couch, crying. Her brother ran into her arms. And Emily. Emily just stood there, shaking. I went to her, wrapping my arms around her. She clung to me, whispering over and over, "I can't do this anymore. I can't." And in that moment, she wasn't just my neighbor or my best friend. She was someone begging for a way out. The next day, Emily made a choice that changed everything. She walked into the school counselor's office and told the truth. All of it. I sat outside the door, waiting, my stomach in knots. When she came out, her face was pale, but her eyes looked lighter, like a weight had lifted. "They're going to help us," she whispered. And they did. Social services stepped in again, this time with urgency. Emily's mom was given the choice: leave with the kids or risk losing them. For the first time, she chose to protect them. Within weeks, Emily, her mom, and her brother moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. The first time I visited, Emily gave me a shaky smile. "It's not much," she said, "but at least it's ours." I looked around at the mismatched furniture, the tiny kitchen, the second-on curtains, and I smiled back. "It's perfect." Because it was. Not because of the space, but because for the first time, Emily didn't flinch when the door closed. For the first time, laughter filled the room without fear lurking underneath. Life wasn't magically easy after that. People still gossiped. Her dad still lingered in the shadows of her mind. And some nights, the memories hit so hard she'd call me, crying until she fell asleep with the phone pressed to her ear. But she was free. And freedom, even messy and painful, was better than silence. Years later, when I look back on that time, one moment always stands out. It was the last night in the old neighborhood, when Emily came over to my porch for one final popsicle before her family moved out. We sat side by side, the summer air heavy, our hands sticky with sugar. She looked at me and whispered, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No, you saved yourself. I just stood by you." She smiled through tears. "No, you stayed when everyone else looked away. And that's what saved me." Her words stuck with me. Because in the end, that's what it means to love someone, not to fix them, not to carry their pain, but to stand beside them when the world tries to tear them apart. Emily and I stayed close even after she moved. She went to college for social work, determined to help kids like her who felt trapped in silence. I wasn't surprised. She turned her pain into purpose, her scars into strength. And every time she speaks about her past now, openly, bravely, I think about that night she first climbed through my window, whispering, "Please, don't tell." Back then, she was terrified of the truth. But now, she owns it. Because the truth may have shattered everything she thought she knew about family, trust, and loyalty. But it also gave her the chance to rebuild, stronger than before. And me? I'll never forget the girl next door. The girl who taught me that sometimes, family isn't about who you're born with, it's about who stays when the walls come crashing down. The girl who was my neighbor, my best friend, my sister in everything but blood. The girl who proved that even in the darkest houses, light can still break through.